Scott Bessent testifying in front of the House Finance Committee. He says the White House is delivering on economic security by imposing tariffs, onshoring manufacturing, and growing the economy through tax cuts and deregulation. Let's go to Darren Battello live on Capitol Hill with more on Bessent's testimony. Darren.
Hi, good afternoon, Brian. The hearing is still going on. You can see the door shut right there. And, you know, this has been going on since 10:30 this morning. Secretary Bessent has been on the hot seat since this morning, taking really pointed questions from members of Congress. Everything from Harriet Tubman going on the $20 bill to, of course, the tariffs and the effect on the economy. There's been a back and forth just for hours. At some points during this hearing, members of Congress have actually started yelling at Secretary Bessent, accusing him of not answering their questions. One congressman from California even said to Bessent, quote, "This is not your finest day," adding that he wasn't going to ask him any questions because it would be, quote, "useless." One of the most fiery parts of this hearing came from Congresswoman Maxine Waters asking for someone to shut Bessent up. Take a listen.
Will you be the voice of reason? Yes or no? You don't have to explain.
Representative Waters,
will you be the voice?
Will
you be the voice? Will you be the voice?
Of inflation,
will you be the voice of reason?
And
will you be the voice of reason?
A study
yes
from
no?
Wharton University
reclaiming my time. Reclaiming my time. Reclaiming my time.
Was a mass unfettered 10 and 20 million immigrants.
Can you shut the housing?
Brian, that was just a taste of what we've been seeing all day today. The focus here from Bessent was supposed to be the Treasury data showing the so-called Liberation Day tariffs that have already raked in over $240 billion in revenue. The White House says that aggressive stance has triggered a staggering $9 trillion in U.S. investment, but critics point to 8 months of lagging manufacturing jobs. Bessent was able to talk about the Fed being too slow with interest rates. Of course, Democrats hitting back about the Fed chair pick from President Trump, Kevin Warsh, which was just announced in the last few days. They had a lot to say about that. Brian?
All right, Darren Battello, thanks for that report. Larry, let's talk about what the Treasury Secretary was supposed to talk about in that hearing. Clearly, Maxine Waters didn't want to let him speak, but the idea was to talk about the economy, particularly tariffs, what effect they've had. What do you make of the progress so far, the path of tariffs, the future of tariffs, what it means for the economy?
You know, he wrote a very good op-ed piece. I mean, filed it last Friday. It ran in the print edition last Saturday. It didn't get much coverage because Kevin Warsh was announced.
The president wrote that piece.
The president, I beg your pardon.
Yep.
And everyone was focused on Kevin Warsh. I get that. But I went back and read the piece, and then I wrote a column, a riff about the piece, because it was very good. It was really spot on. I mean, basically, what he did, and I think this is the way it should be played, the reciprocal trade is part of the package of one big, beautiful bill. So you got your tax cuts, your deregulation throughout the economy, drill, baby, drill, and reciprocal, fair, and free trade, okay? And I think, by and large, it has been successful. You might say it's incomplete because it's a work in motion. You know, like he just cut a deal with India. But there's several points to make. Number one, there never was any worldwide retaliation.
Correct.
You had moments with China, okay, but that was papered over. The 1930s Smoot-Hawley comparison, therefore, breaks down. Breaks down because we didn't have retaliation. That's the point. Instead, you had deal-making. And the deal-making opened up markets for American exports and is bringing investment money here to build new factories and plants.
Right.
These are very good things. And this comes from his deal-making. Another point is, who's going to bear the brunt of this? Now, we can argue and debate. There's a lot of different opinions about who pays the tariffs. He cited the Harvard Business School study. They have an ongoing discussion, which showed that 80% of it came basically from foreign governments and foreign companies. All right. You may not agree with that. All right. But that's the Harvard Business School, for whatever that's worth. My guess is the fears of tarifflation were unfounded. That we know. Goods prices have not jumped off the board. We know that. The other thing that's worth noting is making money on it. It's about a couple $100 billion, which is reducing the federal budget deficit, always a good thing. And the final point that I would make, and I have no idea what Scott Bessent said, okay? I'm not up to speed. I don't watch the hearings and so forth. But I'll say this. the Smoot-Hawley tariff was 60, 70% plus. That was the rate. And that, on top of a tax hike from 25% to 65%, will give you a depression. And that's what happened. Herbert Hoover, the worst president probably in the history of the earth, even worse than Nixon on this. So Trump's tariff, and there's a story about it in the paper today or yesterday, Trump's effective tariff is running 15, 16%.
Right.
That's all. It's not
Kind of about half of what you thought it was going to run at, essentially.
It's a little more than a half of what Liberation Day showed.
Yeah.
And it may come down. It may come down from there. So these things, you know, I'm saying it's a success. The rest of it is, and Republicans have to do much better at this. The economy is red hot. It's not hot, it's red hot.
Okay.
Across the board, red. You just saw, by the way, the two ISMs. I mean, the combined ISM is the best it's been in many years. It's red hot. That we are in capital spending, productivity, low, and the inflation rate for the last 3 months, which Trump points out, is about 1.5%. These are terrific numbers. The trouble is the GOP doesn't talk enough about it. They don't get it out there. That's why they're losing these by-elections. It's one of the key points. And finally, if we get to it later, look. This Trump savings accounts.
We're going to get to that one, Larry.
All right,
we're going there. We're going B block on that one. That's
unbelievably
going big.
We're doing now. I
mean, really, everybody's going to get.
So we're going to go that one. I want to bring my libertarian friend into this because I know your economics. I know you're very skeptical of tariffs. You look at the historical track record. You don't like it. But Larry makes a point about. I don't know that tariffs have been done this way before. In other words, you pair Smoot-Hawley was tariffs and higher taxes, right? This is tariffs with much lower taxes and much less regulation. Is that the difference maker in why these tariffs haven't created the barrier to economic activity that
nobody knows? That's the interesting thing. Nobody really knows what the secret sauce is to this economy because there's so many factors that are just plain weird. You can make the case that tariffs are working because they are in capable hands for someone. The tariffs are the underpinning of his entire political and economic philosophy. It is the reason, along with immigration, that President Trump ran for president. He wanted to change the country for the better. My worry is it's not President Trump because I feel like in terms of his economic vision, he deserves the benefit of the doubt. He's really only a year into his second term. My worry is the next person that comes along. I do not think that there is anyone on the horizon, Democrat or Republican, who would know what to do with global economic instability with tariffs after 2028. That's what worries me. President Trump knows what he's doing. Other people in the Republican Party, and certainly, what would Gavin Newsom do with tariffs in terms of China, in terms of India, who sniffed out his weakness? He's a politician. He just wants to please people.
Yeah.
He does not have a philosophical underpinning
Newsom,
to energy. Yes, Newsom.
Well,
anything not to
so that's something, Jackie, you and I talk about a lot. Who's next and what happens next? Okay, and I think Kennedy brings up a good point. Donald Trump has the ability to hold deals together unlike anybody else.
Didn't anyone ever tell you that it's important to live one day at a time? What really matters is today,
Larry.
right? Yesterday is over. Tomorrow is unknowable. We only have today.
Tomorrow is unknowable, and yet I think we're all called to use wisdom to think about the future, Jackie, and what might happen in the future. What do you say?
I hear you, Larry. We should all live for today, but unfortunately, we look ahead and we think about what is going to happen. Look, if you have J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio in the White House, I'm not worried about it. I think they'll carry on this same kind of, administrative strategy that the president's got going here. But the problem becomes when the pendulum swings and people decide that for one reason or another, they've had enough of this and they want a little bit of that. And we know that that has become far more progressive than it ever once was. And so, we've brought up this issue on the show before. Will the Democrats eventually, when it's their turn, use the precedent that has been set here to basically implement all sorts of taxes across the board on the American people through tariffs, through other vehicles that essentially will end up unlike what the president's strategy has been, like a blanket VAT tax.
Maybe to kill fossil fuels, something like that.
Whatever their reasoning ends up being, or whatever the issue of the moment is at the time. And so I've been concerned about that. But I agree with Larry that you can't worry about things you can't control that come down the pike. And you do have to think about today. And today, I would tell you, I think the president's strategy was great, because without really implementing too many tariffs and backing off of everything, he got everything he wanted. Not only did he get back at countries that had been tariffing us for decades, but at the non-tariff barriers that Peter Navarro always talks about, the things that you can't control. I'm not saying he solved for all of them, but he definitely solved for some of them.
There's another important point on the tariffs. It's a foreign policy, national security tool, and it's a very important tool, and he uses it a lot. Okay, for example, India. Okay, not a trustworthy ally ever. If they stop buying Russian oil, they'll get back to 18%. Okay, it was 50 basically. Trump's being very, very generous on this point, and they do a lot of other things to break deals. India, untrustworthy. He's used tariffs with Europe. He's used tariffs with Canada. I'm just saying it's a foreign policy tool. This is something to I hope the Supreme Court takes into account.
Well, that's going to be a big question.
Make their decision. But you know, in fairness to him, that's another important point that he's making.
Taylor, you watch the people all the time who make a living looking into the future and trying to decide what economic policy is going to mean for the businesses they invest in. Markets obviously way down today, but generally speaking, tariffs have spooked investors less and less over time.
Yeah. Let's talk about the economic data that Larry mentioned, and it was good. The ISM services this morning unchanged in January, but matched the highest since late 2024. 11 out of the 18 major service industries reported growth. Major measures of activity were mixed, but all stand above 50, which signals growth. Let me comment here. Surveys were a mix of positives and negatives, but data center build out is a big strength for them. And a lot of them are reporting that uncertainty seems to be easing, and service firms are increasing hiring for the first time since May. ADP this morning, also good news. Lower hiring than expected, not good news, but underneath the surface, good news. Here's why, Brian. Companies, tiny companies, you employ 1 to 19 companies, they hired 30,000 employees last month. Medium-sized businesses added 41,000, but bigger than that, you're an employer of over 500 employees, you lost 18,000 workers. So I don't like to see workers being fired, but I like that it's small and medium-sized businesses that, at least in the report this morning, are what is driving the hiring. We need these tiny entrepreneurs, the backbone of this country. When you talk about red hot GDP, that's a number that we want to see. The tiny guys that are winning and making it in this environment. You know, the 3-month, just look, I don't think that much of the ADP, and neither here nor there, but the 3-month average, this is Peter Bookvar makes this, is 44,000. This is private sector job. That's not bad. I mean, that's running a little better than non-farm payrolls trend. The 6-month average is 48,000, and the 12-month average is 23,000. So the 3-month is much higher than the 12-month. So you're trending in the right
little acceleration there
direction. And the combined ISMs, put them both together, 53.7, very, very strong and rising. I think you had some sluggishness in manufacturing for a variety of reasons, one of which might have been the tariffs, if you want to put that in. No one's ever going to know. There are other reasons, too. But that's coming back now. Factories are being built. If you build a factory, this is part of the business investment boom, you got to hire. And you're going to be paying them more. And the great part about this is they're earning the higher pay because of the productivity boom that's going on. So take-home pay is up for families and kitchen tables, and they're earning it through productivity. And productivity means what?
Paychecks.
Productivity means what?
We grow our way out of debt.
Yes, it also means lower inflation. Okay, so unit labor costs are rock bottom. That's the ultimate cost of labor and also the inflation rate. Unit labor costs 1.1%
1.1.
over the
can't believe
past
it.
4 quarters.
It's not just hot.
This is like, I'm
It's
just telling you.
red hot.